You don't remember where you've been or what you've just done?
No, I can't make new memories.
Memento is a psychological thriller based around the idea of a protagonist who can't make new memories. He's lost the ability to process information the way we have.
The plot of Memento is a man whose wife has been raped and murdered is trying to solve her mystery while having short-term memory loss.
Memento is a film without a normal structure, shall we say. It plays forwards and backwards at the same time.
It's a murder mystery where we're showing you the murder in the first scene of the film.
You're gonna pay for what you did.
There's a tricky balance at the beginning of intriguing the audience and confusing the audience, and at the same time just giving them enough time to connect with the material.
No!
How to begin a story that starts at the end? Director Chris Nolan and his creative team go back to the beginning of Memento, next on Anatomy of a Scene.
My brother Jonah was writing the short story when he told it to me. He described this idea of this guy with no short-term memory who's taken to using tattoos to record essential information and who's hell-bent on revenge. And really, as soon as I heard it, I thought it'd make a great film. I spent months just banging my head against it, trying to come up with a notion of how do you give the audience the experience of not being able to remember things.
You know who you are, and you know kind of all about yourself.
Then one day I came up with this notion that if you withhold the information from the audience that's withheld from the protagonist, then you're doing quite a good job of putting them in his head.
You really do need a system if you're gonna make it work.
The way to do that is to structure the story backwards.
Nolan structures his film with alternating color and black and white sequences. The color sections take the viewer sequence by sequence backwards in time. The black and white footage, moving more or less forward, provides a different perspective on the character.
The intercutting of the colour and black and white scenes starts to give you a clue to the way the story's told. The colour scenes always end on the beginning of the following colour scene, which is previous in time, if that makes any sense. Hopefully the audience is confused as Leonard is.
Memento's structure is established in the first 3 scenes, a kind of roadmap for how to watch the film.
We wanted to very quickly just express to the audience the rhythm of the piece, how these things were going to fit together, the difference between color material, black and white material, that kind of thing, and to suggest a relationship between those different story elements that was going to progress through the rest of the film. It was clear to me that we'd have to begin with some literally reverse action, reverse chronology, in order to clue the audience into the way in which we're going to play with time. The nice thing about a title sequence is, it gives you a couple of minutes of film where you can really take your time to set something up. And in this case, it's in real time, watching a Polaroid image of this person who's been killed undevelop and fade into nothing, that then leads you into this whole reverse action.
You're seeing the Polaroid undevelop, but because it's a title sequence, I think people aren't necessarily taking that in. And then the next few shots, even though they are in reverse, they don't have very obvious reverse action movement to them. And so you start to become kind of relaxed with these images that are slightly off. And then the gun flies up into his hand, and you're kind of shocked. Oh, this is going backwards. And then you understand, well, that's part of the vocabulary of the film. What? By virtue of the fact that it's in reverse, it takes what would otherwise be a rather gory, bloody scene and turns it into something kind of graphically beautiful. And you can keep your eyes wide open and look at it.
We talked a lot about the shooting Teddy, and it was really important to Chris that we not take it too lightly Yeah, but also for me, it was important that we didn't gross people out too badly with the actual killing.
I came up with the idea of if you did it, you know, from the glasses, so the gunshot would knock the glasses off, and so you would be on the glasses and you'd be on the blood, because they didn't want it to be so violent.
The glasses flying off was Joey's idea, and I loved that because you could sort of go with the glasses instead of with the head.
So where are you? You're in...
After the title sequence, the film shifts to black and white.
You're in a motel room. There's the key.
The black and white scenes became a way of giving the audience what, at the beginning of the film, seems like a more objective view of the character.
The first few cuts are in extreme close-up, so there's disorientation. You don't really know where you are, even though he's saying where he is.
You've been there for a week, 3 months.
There's hesitation in that voiceover.
It's kind of hard to say. I don't know.
That sort of sets the tone that this guy doesn't always know where he is.
The third scene, Color Again, shows the events that immediately precede the murder in the title sequence.
Lenny!
It's Leonard. Like I told you before.
Did you? I must have forgot.
I guess I've already told you about my condition.
Oh, well, only every time I see you.
That sort of launches you into something that's more tangibly identifiable to an audience. So you can say, okay, now we're going to give the audience something they can hold on to.
My car.
This is your car.
Oh, you're in a playful mood. It's not good for you to make fun of someone's handicap.
Just trying to have a little fun.
The whole point of the movie for Teddy is that I need to get that car. I need to get that car, and I need to get the $50,000 out of the trunk of the car. Leonard doesn't remember that the gun and the money is in the trunk of the car.
Roll up your window.
It's broken.
I can get that fixed for you.
And I used to ask Chris, why don't I just, you know, in an off-camera moment when he's sleeping in his motel room, just go steal the car?
So where to, Sherlock?
I got a lead on a place.
And he said, no, Teddy would never do that to Leonard. He liked him too much. As we work our way backward, we find out that, you know, Leonard has been accusing Teddy of a lot of stuff. And Teddy's kind of fed up with it.
Come on.
Let's take a look inside.
Teddy, don't believe his lies. He is the one. Kill him. I finally found him. How long have I been looking?
Find anything? Didn't think so. Let's go, huh? Oh, fuck this.
You're gonna pay for what you did. Beg forgiveness, and then you pay.
The guy's hit me with a gun and my mouth is bleeding. So I confront him.
You're a clue, you freak.
Beg my wife's forgiveness before I blow your brains out.
Leonard, you don't know what's going on. You don't even know my name.
Teddy.
That's because you read it off a fucking picture. You don't know who you are.
I'm Leonard Shelby. I'm from San Francisco.
That's who you were. That's not what you become.
But there's that one moment right before he pulls the trigger where I realized that there is something different here. It was something that happened that I missed, and it's going to cost me my life. And that's when I say no.
No!
On the page, the character is quite ambiguous in terms of a lot of things. You know, he doesn't know how long it's been since the incident, so you don't quite know how old he is and what's happened to him in the intervening years.
In assembling the cast for Memento, the filmmakers knew that the audience would rely on first impressions even more than usual.
We had always been a big fan of guys. My sister and I both had seen Priscilla, Queen of the Desert and LA Confidential. We were just so amazed that the same actor played those two parts because he's so unrecognizable, and he knew he was a great chameleon.
When Guy was sort of constructing his look for the piece, and you know, he wanted to have blonde hair, for example, the first time I was worried, well, you'll be able to tell that it's dyed, you know, because you often can when you see it. And then I thought, well, actually it doesn't matter if you do or not, because it's all suggesting something about past experience. It's all suggesting backstory that you can't ever quite get access to.
We cast Carrie Ann next, and I thought she had the right qualities for the film. It is a cool film, and everyone in it is sort of cool in temperature as well. So when we cast her as Natalie and we were still looking for Teddy, she suggested Joey Pants.
What was interesting about casting Joe Pantoliano is when I first met him, I had a lot of resistance casting him because of his familiarity. Everybody's got their favorite Joey Pants film, and you know, have that association where they think they know who this guy's going to be. But then through the course of the film, you're kind of turning that on its head, or you're tweaking it, and you're saying, well, maybe you don't quite know who this guy is.
I knew that I wasn't his first choice. He was concerned that people would know that I was the bad guy too soon.
He has played a lot of bad guys, but he's also a very accessible person. And we thought that was a great contrast to Leonard, you know, that he would be that kind of person who would sidle up to someone, a stranger who doesn't play well with others, and kind of get in there.
Yo, Lenny! I thought you split for good.
Well, things change.
So I see.
That immediate familiarity of association becomes a very positive thing about Joey in the role, because it really makes you have the same judgment on the character, the same instantaneous assessment that Leonard does.
It was important for us to have someone who had a sense of humor, to have a little fun, to take a little pressure off in the film.
And then the actor that they offered it to refused to work for so little. So I was lucky enough to, you know, get the part and work for free.
We talked a lot about creating this world in which the main character is limited in regards to his capacity to perceive by this problem with memory.
Nolan wanted the look of Memento, like the story structure, to bring the audience into Leonard's point of view.
One of the very first things we considered was the palette of the picture, and Chris told me first that he wanted the movie to be all blue. And I eventually convinced him to enlarge the palette a little bit in order to construct a kind of more naturalistic thing. We were really trying to make a world that seems like the world that we see when we walk around, and yet cinematically has to be completely limited in order to construct this point of view.
The movie is written with very little description as far as where it took place, but it was important that it could be sort of in any town, USA, but not anywhere that, you know, is so associated with an urban environment.
For Nolan, limiting the film's look and location evoked the dead-end, nowhere sensibility of classic film noir.
We talked a lot about not referencing too obviously the cinematic idea of what film noir is. If you look at a film like Double Indemnity, there are scenes set in a supermarket. There's a scene in a bowling alley. You know, it's actually a very ordinary, everyday reality. If you're going to do that now, you have to be very contemporary and not, you know, have guys in fedoras kind of walking around.
One of the actually really key points about this idea of realism is for it to not become a series of symbols. You have these sort of anonymous places.
The kind of environment where you would wake up with no memory and it would be very difficult for you to orient yourself and identify exactly where you are. So with the motel, for example, we spent a lot of time looking for something that was realistic and ordinary and yet in some way expressive of the story.
Hotel rooms don't have a lot of pictures in them. They don't have a lot of stuff in them. So we have to come up with something to sort of like visually engage the viewer in the frame to keep them sort of interested without it just being all flat. We came up with these very sort of subtle details that we researched by sending an assistant to sneak into hotel rooms while people weren't there but before they had been cleaned and taking pictures.
The production team put considerable effort into finding, then designing the derelict building where Teddy is killed.
It was very important to me that we find a location with a couple of slightly memorable details. It had to be very recognizable so that when we came back to it, and even shoot it in black and white, as we do at the end of the film, you would immediately know where you were.
I knew that this was going to be one of the sort of main sets of the film, and we wanted it to have all of this kind of like textural detail, and yet not to be have any identification, to be able to be anonymous. So there's tile, there's like this very precise cracking of plaster and leakage of light. I knew we were going to be in there to begin with and at the end, and it sort of had to be the place, you know, the place that had the richness to it.
Color sequences are intensely subjective and very much from Leonard's point of view. As far as the blocking went, you know, where we put the camera was very important, and what we tried to do is always kind of be over his shoulder, always kind of pushing in with him.
Every time Leonard was going from point A to point B, we would follow him with the camera behind him, keeping him in frame, seeing where he's going, tracking in front of him. Basically, the camera sticking with him. We did a lot of inserts, which sort of keeps you with Leonard as well. So you're with him, you have him in the frame with you, and then you're seeing isolated details of what he's seeing and what he's doing.
This is somebody who doesn't know anything outside of his immediate environment, and so the feel of that environment, the look of it, is very important to him, and I really wanted the audience to have some sense of what everything was made from, what it would feel like if you touched it.
Chris emphasized to me that he really wanted a natural look for the film. He wanted naturally motivated light, coming from window sources. He didn't want an over-stylized look. He wanted the audience to be able to focus on Leonard, and he didn't want distractions.
In the black and white scenes, Nolan wanted the camera to suggest a more objective point of view.
We used a higher angle looking down on Leonard in his bed. It's almost like a security camera point of view, and really takes you out of what's going on and becomes sort of a third-person point of view. The black and white material was to look more documentary-ish. We blew the windows out a little more, had a little starker contrast, and a little looser of a camera, a little more of a verite style.
The reverse action title sequence was accomplished by literally running the film backwards through the camera magazine.
It's not an optical trick. We didn't shoot the sequence of him killing Teddy and then just reverse it. Rather than doing it in post, we actually shot using a reverse mag, and really with an eye to how each individual shot is going to connect with the other with reverse action.
We both wanted to stay away from opticals because you pick up a lot of grain when you do an optical.
The image quality is pristine. I mean, it's as good as anything else in the film because it's original negative. And the reason I wanted to do that is I wanted to try and construct a more real space, a more real feeling of the action that was going on. It was one of the few scenes in the film that I needed to actually storyboard for people. Everyone got a little bit confused. There's one shot in the sequence where it all went totally wrong, because where the shell casing comes to life and spins up into the gun, it wasn't possible to really shoot that in reverse, because you're dropping a shell casing, you're never going to get it into that tiny frame. So I came up with a solution, which is to, I had the shell casing on the floor, and I'm just out of frame there, and I blow it out of shot. So it's actually forwards action to simulate reverse action. Problem is, everyone was so confused by that point, they actually shot it using a reverse mag. So when I saw it on film, the shell casing neatly drops into frame and stops exactly. So then we had to do an optical to reverse that. So it's an optical reversing a forward running shot that's actually a simulation of a reverse shot. You can't remove a scene from the film because every scene connects in a very literal, specific and linear way with the scene that precedes it and the scene that follows it.
Since Memento's structure is so complex, the filmmakers edited the opening with close attention to the length of each sequence.
It's a tricky balance at the beginning of intriguing the audience and confusing the audience, and at the same time just giving them enough time to connect with the material enough.
You don't want an audience to feel like they're going to be getting constantly hit on the back of the head with a 2x4.
We wound up playing with how long those blocks of time at the beginning should be.
To guide the audience through Memento's backward story, shots used at the beginning of one color sequence are repeated at the end of the next.
Lenny!
We couldn't use different takes for this repeated action because the subtleties of differences in the performance would throw people off. They needed to know that it was exactly the same event, exactly the same material. And then the challenge was to figure how much do you show? And we kind of picked icons.
the beginning of the film, I wanted to do it in its most exaggerated form, and it seemed like a gunshot to the head is, you know, about as unsubtle as you can be in that regard. So in having this shot first in reverse and then coming back to it at the end of the next color sequence was a very dramatic and effective way of bringing the audience's attention to the relationship between these two scenes that they've just experienced. None of the sounds are backwards. They're all forward sounds that have been edited to work with this reverse action. The tinkle of the shell casing coming off the ground, the camera spitting the picture out. They're all forward sounds because backward sound is not something we can ever hear with our ears.
It was all designed to be actually quite deceptive.
We wanted this disorienting feeling of, what if you look at the world in a different way? What if you experience something in a different way? Because that's the whole point of the film. That's how the whole film works.
So where are you? You're in...
Nolan intended the monologues in the black and white sequences to sound like a documentary.
There's the key.
The voiceover on the black and white scenes is second person. It's designed to sound like interview grabs, like this kind of interview that's been edited together.
You've been there for a week, 3 months.
Chris recorded the voiceover with Guy, and they didn't have a very strict script that he followed. Chris had this in mind, that he would ramble on about his condition, and we would cut it together and create sentences out of it.
You kind of learn to trust your own handwriting. That becomes an important part of your life.
What it did was it created kind of a faux documentary feel. So you felt almost like this was some lost film about somebody with this condition.
Chris had a little issue with Joey's dialogue, I think, just one little problem.
There's a line where he's down and he says, "You don't have a clue, you freak," and he never quite nailed that. And I actually wound up doing a thing that I know Orson Welles did in the past, whatever, and I thought it goes, I just revoiced the line myself.
You don't have a clue, you freak.
But he didn't seem to mind. He's never complained about it anyway. So.
No, this is the first I'm hearing about it.
The challenge of scoring Memento, which is particularly obvious in this opening sequence we're looking at, was to get the different feelings of Leonard's moods.
The composer came up with distinct sounds to differentiate between the black and white and color sequences.
The black and white music is very, very dark, very cold, very oppressive. It's all strange sub-bass synthesizer drones. Quite subliminal. I think a lot of people don't even realize it's there. When we get out to the color sequences, Leonard's definitely cast adrift, and that's the sense of loss. And we get these pieces of music with a sort of haunting electronic string sound over a very atmospheric ambient backing.
One of the things we talked about a lot was emotion. It was very important that he tap into the notion of a character who feels things and doesn't necessarily remember why he's feeling those things. We wanted the music to sort of suggest sadness or melancholy without explaining it, and in that way sort of try and draw the audience into his emotional state. I've always been interested in the story that would be based around the concept of the unreliable narrator. And to me, this was a fascinating way in which a narrator would prove to be unreliable. He's not lying, he's not dreaming, he just can't view the world the same way we do.
It's disturbing, therefore, because you can see something and on the surface think it's one thing, and then when you have a little more information, you find out it's something completely different.
People go to see this movie, and then they run to a coffee shop, and they're sitting around dissecting it. I mean, I've actually had people confront me in the street and say, "What was that movie about?"
Cinema's incredibly adept at manipulating point of view invisibly. It allows you to put the audience into the head of a character without the audience realizing that that's exactly what you've done. And I think that there's a lot you can suggest about the way we all live and the things we take for granted by seeing a story through the eyes of somebody like this.